Most men are never taught how to control their emotions. They are taught how to hide them, to suppress anger, to swallow frustration, to stay silent until the pressure builds and explodes at the worst possible moment. And over time, that quiet damage shows up everywhere, in relationships, in confidence, in the way you react when life does not go your way. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The man who loses emotional control is not weak, he is untrained. His nervous system has never been shown how to slow down. His mind has never been taught how to separate emotion from action. Every emotional reaction you have ever regretted followed the same pattern. Something happened, your body reacted, your mind followed, and before clarity could arrive, the moment was already lost. But what if emotional control was not about becoming cold or distant? What if it was about becoming precise, calm under pressure, unshaken when others panic? In this audiobook, you will learn how powerful men regulate emotion without suppressing it, how they remain centered when challenged, how they respond instead of react, and how mastering this skill quietly transforms respect, confidence, and leadership. Stay with this until the end, because once you understand how emotional control truly works, you will never see your reactions the same way again. Chapter 1. Why emotional control is a man's greatest advantage. There is a moment in every man's life when he realizes that strength is not what he was taught it was. It is not volume, it is not force, it is not domination. True strength reveals itself in the moments when you could lose control but choose not to. When something inside you surges anger, fear, frustration, pride, and instead of reacting, you remain steady. That steadiness is power. Most men grow up learning how to endure emotion, not how to lead it. They are taught to push feelings down, to keep moving, to stay silent until the pressure builds. Over time, this creates a dangerous misunderstanding. Emotional control becomes confused with emotional suppression. But suppression is not control. Suppression is delay, and what is delayed eventually explodes. Emotional control is the ability to feel fully without surrendering authority over your actions. It is the capacity to remain calm when challenged, composed when provoked, and clear when everything inside you urges reaction. This skill changes how you move through the world. It changes how people respond to you, and it changes how you see yourself. A man who controls his emotional responses does not give his power away to circumstance. He does not allow disrespect to dictate his behavior. He does not let frustration decide his next move. He chooses, and choice is the foundation of leadership. This is why emotional control is a man's greatest advantage. When you lack emotional control, life feels reactive. Conversations turn into battles. Small problems feel overwhelming. Decisions are made in moments of heat and regretted later in silence. You feel like you are constantly cleaning up the aftermath of your own reactions. But when emotional control is present, something shifts. You slow down, you see more clearly, you act with intention. You stop being pulled into unnecessary conflict. You stop saying things you wish you could take back. You stop sabotaging your own progress. This does not make you cold, it makes you precise. Men who master emotional control are not emotionless, they are regulated. They feel anger, but they do not let it drive them into destruction. They feel fear, but they do not let it paralyze them. They feel frustration, but they do not let it poison their decisions. This regulation creates presence. Presence creates respect. People trust the man who does not overreact. They feel safe around him. They listen when he speaks. His words carry weight because they are not fueled by impulse, they are chosen. Emotional control also creates internal peace. When you no longer feel hijacked by your reactions, your mind becomes quieter. You stop replaying moments in your head.
You stop living in regret over things said in anger or fear. You trust yourself more because you know you can handle pressure without collapsing. This trust is transformative. Many men believe emotional control means tolerating disrespect. It does not. It means responding to disrespect with clarity instead of chaos. You set boundaries calmly. You address issues directly. You walk away when necessary without needing to prove anything. This kind of response disarms conflict. It leaves others uncertain of how to provoke you because you are no longer predictable. And unpredictability, when grounded in calm, is power. There is also a deeper layer to this advantage. Emotional control allows you to see reality clearly. Strong emotions distort perception. They narrow your focus. They make problems feel larger and options feel fewer. When you remain regulated, your perception widens. You see multiple paths. You choose the one that serves you best. This clarity compounds over time. Better decisions lead to better outcomes. Better outcomes reinforce confidence. Confidence strengthens calm. Calm strengthens control. This is the upward spiral of mastery. Emotional control also protects your energy. Reactivity is exhausting. Being pulled into every emotional trigger drains you. When you choose your responses carefully, you conserve strength. You move through life with more focus, more patience, more endurance. You begin to realize that not every situation deserves your reaction. Not every comment requires your response. Not every challenge needs to be met head-on. Discernment becomes your ally. A man with emotional control does not seek validation through reaction. He does not need to prove toughness by losing his composure. He understands that the strongest men are the ones who remain calm under pressure. This calmness does not mean passivity, it means readiness. You are alert, aware, and capable. You simply refuse to be dragged into unnecessary emotional noise. Over time, this becomes part of your identity. You see yourself differently. You no longer identify as someone who loses control or reacts impulsively. You begin to see yourself as steady, composed, and grounded. Identity shapes behavior. Behavior shapes destiny. As this identity takes root, you notice changes everywhere. Conversations become easier. Conflicts resolve faster. Your presence feels heavier, not in tension, but in authority. People sense that you cannot be easily shaken. This is not arrogance, it is assurance. Emotional control also deepens your relationships. Whether in leadership, friendship, or romance, emotional stability builds trust. People feel heard instead of attacked. They feel understood instead of overwhelmed. They open up because they know they will not be met with volatility. This stability becomes attractive. Respect grows naturally. The greatest advantage of emotional control is not how it changes others, though it will. It is how it changes you. You stop being at war with your own reactions. You stop fearing moments of pressure. You know that no matter what arises, you can meet it with clarity. This knowledge is liberating. You move through the world with confidence that does not need to announce itself. You speak when it matters. You remain silent when silence is strength. You act when action is necessary. You wait when patience serves you better. This is the beginning of mastery. In the chapters ahead, you will learn how this control is built step by step, not through suppression, but through awareness, not through force, but through discipline, not by becoming less human, but by becoming more intentional. For now, understand this truth. A man who controls his emotional responses controls his direction. He is no longer dragged by impulse or circumstance. He chooses who he becomes in every moment, and that choice is the greatest advantage a man can possess.
Chapter 2. The biology behind male emotional reactions. Before you can control your emotional responses, you must understand what is actually happening inside your body when emotion strikes. Most men believe emotions begin in the mind. In reality, emotion begins in the body long before thought arrives. A tightening in the chest, a surge of heat, a spike in the heart rate, a rush of energy that feels urgent and overwhelming. By the time the mind tries to interpret what is happening, the body has already reacted. This is why emotional reactions feel automatic and difficult to stop. Your biology moves faster than your logic. The male nervous system is designed for action, for threat detection, for rapid response. Thousands of years ago, this instinct kept men alive. Danger required immediate movement, not reflection. Fight or flee. Act now, think later. But in modern life, the threats are rarely physical. They are emotional, social, and psychological. Disrespect, rejection, failure, uncertainty. Yet your body responds as if survival itself is at stake. When someone challenges your status or questions your competence, your nervous system activates. Adrenaline floods your bloodstream. Muscles tense. Breathing shortens. This reaction is not weakness, it is biology. The problem arises when biology is left untrained. An untrained nervous system treats every challenge as a crisis, every disagreement as a threat, every emotional discomfort as something that must be eliminated immediately. This is where men lose control, not because they lack discipline, but because they lack understanding. Emotional control begins with recognizing that your body reacts before your mind can intervene. And until you learn to regulate that physical response, your emotions will continue to hijack your decisions. When stress hits, the nervous system shifts into survival mode. Blood flow prioritizes large muscle groups. Fine reasoning weakens. The brain narrows focus to immediate outcomes. This is why men say things they regret in heated moments. This is why logic disappears during anger. The system is doing what it was designed to do, but in the wrong context. The key to emotional control is not fighting this system, it is retraining it. When you learn to slow your physiology, your mind regains authority. Breath becomes critical here. Slow, controlled breathing signals safety to the nervous system. It tells the body that the threat is not immediate, that survival does not require reaction. This signal allows the rational brain to re-engage. When your breath slows, your heart rate follows. When your heart rate stabilizes, clarity returns. This is not philosophy, this is physiology. Men who remain calm under pressure are not immune to stress. Their bodies feel the surge just like anyone else. The difference is that their nervous systems have learned how to regulate instead of escalate. They interrupt the reaction before it turns into action. Another important biological factor is testosterone. Testosterone increases sensitivity to status challenges. When a man feels disrespected, dismissed, or challenged, the emotional response intensifies. This is why anger often follows perceived disrespect. It is not immaturity, it is chemistry. Understanding this removes shame and replaces it with responsibility. You stop judging yourself for feeling and start training yourself to respond. Emotional mastery begins the moment you stop saying, "Why am I like this?" and start saying, "This is what is happening inside me." That shift creates space for control. When you recognize the physical signs early, tension rising, jaw tightening, breath shortening, heat building, you gain a window of opportunity. That window is the pause. That pause is power. Most men lose control because they miss this moment. They react after the body has already taken over. But when you train awareness, you catch the signal sooner. You respond while control is still available. Over time, this awareness rewires your nervous system. The body learns that not every trigger requires escalation. Stress no longer equals danger. Challenge no longer equals attack. This training creates emotional stability. Stability becomes confidence. Confidence becomes presence. Presence becomes authority. Emotional control is not mental toughness alone. It is physical regulation paired with mental awareness. When the body is calm, the mind becomes sharp. When the mind is sharp, decisions improve. When decisions improve, life changes. This is why emotional control must be trained from the inside out. You do not dominate emotion by force. You guide it by understanding. You slow the body so the mind can lead. Over time, this process becomes automatic. Your nervous system adapts. The surge still comes, but it passes faster. The heat rises, but it cools sooner. The urge to react appears, but it no longer controls you. This is what it means to be regulated. Not numb, not detached, but grounded.
A regulated man does not fear his emotions. He understands them. He uses them as information rather than commands. And this understanding becomes the foundation for everything that follows. Because once you master your biology, your emotions stop feeling like enemies and start becoming tools. And a man who can use his emotions without being controlled by them holds a level of power few ever reach.
Chapter 3. The moment you lose control and how it begins. Every emotional reaction you have ever regretted followed the same pattern. It did not begin with words. It did not begin with action. It began with a moment so small most men never notice it. A shift in energy, a tightening in the body, a subtle internal pressure that whispered, "React now." That moment is where control is either claimed or lost. And once you understand how it works, you realize emotional explosions are never sudden. They are simply unnoticed until it is too late. The loss of control begins before you raise your voice, before you send the message, before you slam the door. It begins in the space between stimulus and awareness. Something happens externally, a comment, a look, a tone, a perceived challenge. Instantly, your body responds, the nervous system activates, heat rises, breathing shortens, muscles tense. This happens faster than thought. And if awareness is absent, the body takes the lead. The mind follows. Reaction becomes inevitable. Most men believe they lose control because the situation was too intense. That is rarely true. They lose control because they did not notice the early signals. Emotional reactions feel uncontrollable only when awareness arrives late. By the time the mind becomes involved, the body has already decided. This is why regret follows reaction. You only see clearly after the surge has passed. The truth is that emotional control is not about stopping emotion. It is about catching it early. The earlier you notice the internal shift, the more power you have. The later you notice it, the more control you lose. This is why emotional mastery begins with sensitivity rather than toughness. Sensitivity to internal cues, sensitivity to physical signals, sensitivity to the moment where reaction is forming. Most men are trained to ignore these signals. They are taught to push through discomfort, to override sensation, to stay hard. But ignoring internal signals does not make them disappear. It makes them explode later. Emotional pressure builds quietly. Each ignored signal adds weight. Each unaddressed response compounds until one moment becomes the breaking point. And when it breaks, it feels sudden. But it was never sudden. It was cumulative. The moment control slips is the moment awareness drops. Awareness is what creates choice. Without awareness, there is only impulse. This is why emotional reactions feel automatic. They are automatic when awareness is absent. The body reacts, the mind justifies, action follows, control is lost. But when awareness is present, the pattern changes. You feel the signal early, the tightening, the heat, the urge, and instead of being pulled by it, you observe it. Observation slows the process. Slowing creates space. Space creates choice. Choice creates control. This is the moment that separates reactive men from regulated men. The reactive man experiences emotion as command. The regulated man experiences emotion as information. Information can be evaluated. Commands are obeyed. Most men obey emotion without realizing it. They believe they chose to react. In reality, the reaction chose them. Emotional control begins when you reclaim authorship, when you stop being driven by the body and start guiding it. This guidance does not require force. It requires presence, the ability to stay with sensation without immediately discharging it through action. This is difficult at first because the body seeks release. Anger seeks expression. Fear seeks escape. Frustration seeks confrontation. But release through reaction is not resolution. It is reinforcement. Each time you react impulsively, the nervous system learns that reaction is the correct response. The pattern strengthens. The threshold lowers. Over time, it takes less and less to trigger you. This is how men become volatile without realizing it. Control erodes gradually. But the opposite is also true. Each time you pause instead of reacting, the nervous system learns regulation. Each time you breathe instead of exploding, the body learns safety. Each time you stay present instead of discharging emotion, your capacity grows. Emotional capacity is the ability to hold sensation without losing clarity. Strong men are not those who feel less, they are those who can hold more without breaking. The moment you lose control is always preceded by a choice you did not know you had. The choice to notice or ignore, to pause or accelerate, to breathe or react. Once you learn to recognize this moment, everything changes. You stop feeling surprised by your reactions. You stop saying, "I do not know what came over me." You know exactly what happened. You missed the signal. Awareness arrived late, and now you know how to catch it earlier. This knowledge is power. It removes mystery from emotion. It replaces shame with responsibility. You stop labeling yourself as someone who loses control and start seeing yourself as someone who is learning to intervene sooner. This shift builds confidence, confidence in your ability to handle pressure, confidence in your ability to stay composed, confidence in your ability to lead yourself through intensity. The moment control slips is no longer something to fear. It becomes a moment to train. Each trigger becomes practice. Each challenge becomes feedback. You learn to stay present longer, to breathe deeper, to remain aware under pressure. Over time, the gap between stimulus and reaction widens, and in that widening gap, freedom emerges. You are no longer trapped by impulse. You are no longer at the mercy of emotion. You are engaged, alert, grounded. This is the beginning of mastery, not perfection, awareness, not suppression, regulation, not avoidance, presence. A man who understands where control is lost knows exactly where to reclaim it. And once reclaimed, it strengthens every part of his life. His decisions improve, his relationships stabilize, his presence deepens. Because emotional control is not about never feeling intensity, it is about meeting intensity with awareness instead of surrender. And that awareness is the skill that turns reaction into response and chaos into control.
Chapter 4. The difference between suppression and mastery. Many men believe emotional control means shutting everything down, staying silent, locking it inside, pushing forward and hoping it disappears. This belief is one of the most damaging misunderstandings a man can carry. Suppression is not strength, it is storage. And what is stored without release does not dissolve. It accumulates, it hardens, it waits. Mastery is something entirely different. Mastery is not about killing emotion, it is about guiding it. It is the ability to feel fully without allowing feeling to dictate behavior. When a man suppresses emotion, he disconnects from himself. When a man masters emotion, he becomes deeply connected and deeply in control. Suppression numbs awareness. Mastery sharpens it. Suppression teaches the body that emotion is dangerous. Mastery teaches the body that emotion is manageable. This difference shapes everything. Suppression often looks strong on the surface. The man stays quiet. He does not react. He appears composed. But internally, the pressure builds. The body remains tense. The nervous system stays activated. The emotion never resolves. It simply waits for a safer moment to escape. And when it does, it comes out sideways, as irritability, as sudden anger, as distance, as emotional shutdown. This is why suppressed emotion eventually leaks into behavior. The body always finds a way to express what the mind refuses to process. Mastery works differently. Mastery allows the emotion to move through awareness. The man feels the surge but does not fuse with it. He notices the sensation without identifying with it. He stays present long enough for the body to regulate. This presence is what allows emotion to complete its cycle. Suppression interrupts the cycle. Mastery completes it. This is why mastery creates calm rather than tension. A man who suppresses emotion often believes he is in control because nothing is visible. But control is not about appearance. It is about internal state. If your jaw is clenched, your breath is shallow, your body is rigid, you are not calm, you are contained. Containment is not regulation, it is pressure management. Regulation is release through awareness. The goal is not to feel nothing, the goal is to feel without losing command. This is where many men struggle because mastery requires patience. Suppression is immediate, you shut it down and move on. Mastery requires staying with discomfort long enough for it to settle. That takes courage, it takes discipline, it takes trust in your ability to handle intensity without acting on it. Most men were never taught this skill. They were taught to endure, to push through, to ignore internal signals. But ignoring signals does not make them disappear. It makes them louder later. Mastery listens early. It notices the first sign of tension and responds with regulation rather than reaction. This response can be as simple as breathing deeply, softening the body, slowing the pace, giving the nervous system time to settle. When you do this consistently, the body learns safety. It learns that emotion does not require explosion or shutdown. It learns that presence resolves intensity. Over time, this retrains your emotional baseline. Suppression creates fragility. Mastery creates resilience. The suppressed man can hold until he cannot. The mastered man can hold without breaking. This difference shows up in conflict. The suppressed man avoids until pressure builds, then erupts. The mastered man addresses issues early with calm clarity. This difference shows up in relationships. The suppressed man withdraws emotionally, then explodes unpredictably. The mastered man remains available without becoming overwhelmed. This difference shows up in leadership. The suppressed man appears strong until pressure cracks him. The mastered man remains steady regardless of stress. Mastery also allows for expression without damage. You can communicate frustration without aggression. You can express anger without cruelty. You can assert boundaries without hostility. Suppression avoids expression. Mastery refines it. The refined expression of emotion builds respect. People trust men who can speak clearly without emotional volatility. They listen because the message is not distorted by impulse. This clarity builds authority. It builds credibility. It builds influence. Many men fear mastery because they believe feeling will weaken them. In truth, suppression weakens. Mastery strengthens. Feeling fully with awareness expands emotional capacity. The more you practice staying present with emotion, the more resilient you become. You stop fearing intensity. You stop running from discomfort. You stop numbing yourself to survive. Instead, you engage consciously. This engagement is power. Mastery also frees energy. Suppression consumes energy. It requires constant effort to hold emotion down. Mastery releases that effort. When emotion moves through naturally, energy returns, focus sharpens, presence deepens. You feel lighter because nothing is being carried unnecessarily. This lightness is not weakness, it is efficiency. Emotional efficiency is the ability to process experience without waste. Suppression wastes energy through tension. Mastery conserves energy through regulation. Over time, this difference compounds. The mastered man becomes calmer under pressure. He recovers faster from stress. He remains grounded in uncertainty. He does not need to prove control because control is embodied. This shift changes self-identity. You no longer see yourself as someone who must contain himself. You see yourself as someone who can handle himself. That shift changes everything. When you trust your ability to feel without reacting, you no longer fear emotional situations. You no longer avoid conflict. You no longer shut down intimacy. You meet life directly, calmly, clearly, present. This is the essence of mastery. It is not suppression masquerading as strength. It is regulation grounded in awareness. It is the ability to stay open without losing authority, to stay human without losing control, to stay engaged without becoming overwhelmed. A man who understands this difference stops fighting his emotions and starts leading them. And leadership is always stronger than resistance.
Chapter 5. Training the pause between trigger and action. Every moment of emotional control lives or dies in a space so small it is almost invisible. It exists between what happens to you and what you do next. That space is the pause. And for most men, it is either untrained or completely ignored. They believe emotion forces action, that reaction is inevitable, that once the feeling hits, the outcome is already decided. But this belief is false. The pause is real, it is trainable, and it is the single most powerful skill a man can develop. The pause is where instinct ends and choice begins. It is the gap between impulse and behavior. When that gap is narrow, reactions feel uncontrollable. When that gap widens, control becomes natural. Most men live with a pause that is almost non-existent. A trigger appears, the body reacts, the action follows immediately. Words leave the mouth, messages are sent, decisions are made. Only afterward does awareness arrive, usually in the form of regret. This happens not because the man lacks intelligence or discipline, but because the pause was never trained. The nervous system learned speed, not restraint. Training the pause begins with recognizing that emotional urgency is not truth. When emotion spikes, it creates a sense of now. React now, speak now, act now. This urgency feels convincing because it is biological. The body wants resolution, it wants release. But immediate release is not resolution, it is reinforcement. Every time you react instantly, you teach your nervous system that speed equals safety. That pattern strengthens, the pause weakens. Training the pause requires doing the opposite of what impulse demands. It requires slowing down when everything inside you wants to accelerate. This slowing is not hesitation, it is command. The first step is noticing the urge itself, the desire to interrupt, to defend, to correct, to escalate. That urge is the signal that the pause is needed. Instead of acting on it, you stay with it. You let the sensation exist without obeying it. This is uncomfortable at first. The body resists, the mind searches for justification. But discomfort is not danger. It is simply untrained capacity being stretched. The pause grows through repetition. Each time you choose not to react immediately, you lengthen it. Each time you breathe instead of speaking, you strengthen it. Each time you allow emotion to peak without discharging it through action, you expand your control. This is not suppression. You are not pushing emotion down. You are allowing it to move through without hijacking behavior. Breath is the anchor that holds the pause in place. Slow breathing keeps the nervous system from escalating. It gives the rational mind time to re-engage. It creates space where clarity can return. When you breathe deeply and slowly during emotional activation, you are telling your body that it is safe to wait. Waiting is power. Waiting gives you options. In that space, you can choose silence instead of reaction. You can choose curiosity instead of defensiveness. You can choose restraint instead of explosion. The pause also trains humility. It teaches you that you do not need to win every moment. You do not need to correct every statement. You do not need to respond to every provocation. Strength is shown not in constant assertion, but in selective action. Over time, this selectivity sharpens your judgment. You begin to see situations more clearly. You recognize when engagement is necessary and when disengagement is wiser. You stop confusing movement with progress. The pause also protects relationships. Many conflicts are not caused by disagreement, but by timing. Words spoken too soon, reactions delivered too fast, emotions expressed before clarity arrived. The pause allows you to respond when your message can be heard, rather than when it can be felt as attack. This timing changes outcomes. It turns confrontation into conversation. It turns tension into understanding. It turns chaos into order. Training the pause also reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is easily triggered. You begin to see yourself as someone who is composed under pressure. This identity reinforces behavior. The more you practice the pause, the more it becomes natural. Eventually, it feels strange to react immediately. Calm response becomes your default. Others notice this change. They sense your steadiness. They feel less need to provoke or test because you are no longer predictable. Your emotional reactions no longer provide entertainment or leverage. This creates respect, not through fear, but through presence. The pause also creates inner peace. When you no longer regret your reactions, your mind becomes quieter. You trust yourself more. You stop replaying conversations. You stop wishing you had said or done something differently. That trust reduces anxiety. Anxiety often comes from knowing you cannot rely on your own responses. When you trust your pause, anxiety fades. Training the pause is not about perfection. You will still react sometimes. That does not erase progress. Each moment of awareness strengthens capacity. Each successful pause builds confidence. Each failure becomes feedback. The goal is not elimination of emotion, but mastery of response. Over time, the pause becomes automatic. Emotion arises, the body activates, and instead of reaction, there is space. In that space, you lead yourself. You choose your words. You choose your actions. You choose who you are in that moment. This is emotional leadership. This is the difference between being controlled by life and directing yourself through it. A man who has trained the pause cannot be easily shaken. He does not rush into conflict. He does not collapse under pressure. He does not surrender control to impulse. He moves deliberately, calmly, intentionally. And that deliberate movement becomes his strength. Because the pause is not weakness, it is command. It is the moment where power is reclaimed. And once you train it, no trigger ever fully owns you again.
Chapter 6. Handling anger without letting it control you. Anger is one of the most misunderstood forces in a man's inner world. Most men are taught that anger is either dangerous or powerful, something to suppress or something to unleash. Rarely are they taught the truth. Anger is information. It is energy, and when guided correctly, it becomes one of the most clarifying forces a man can access. When left untrained, it becomes destructive. Handling anger without letting it control you begins with understanding that anger itself is not the problem. The problem is what happens when anger takes the wheel. Anger often arrives fast and loud. It tightens the body. It sharpens focus. It creates urgency. It demands action. This intensity is why anger feels powerful. It gives a sense of certainty when everything else feels unclear. But certainty born from anger is rarely wise. It narrows perception. It simplifies complex situations into enemies and threats. And once perception narrows, control slips. Many men fear anger because of what it has caused in the past, words spoken that cannot be taken back, actions that created distance, moments where pride cost more than it gained. But fearing anger does not resolve it. Avoiding it only gives it more power when it finally erupts. Mastery begins when you stop fearing anger and start listening to it. Anger always points to something beneath it, a boundary crossed, a value violated, a need ignored, a sense of disrespect. When anger arises, it is signaling that something matters. The mistake most men make is reacting to the signal instead of interpreting it. Reaction discharges energy without understanding. Interpretation transforms energy into insight. Handling anger starts with staying present long enough to feel it without acting on it. This is where most men struggle. Anger creates heat and momentum. The body wants release. The urge to confront or dominate feels irresistible. But that urge is not truth, it is sensation. And sensation passes if you allow it. When you stay with the physical feeling of anger without acting, the intensity peaks and falls. This teaches the nervous system that anger does not require explosion. Over time, the body learns regulation. This does not mean anger disappears, it means it becomes manageable. A regulated man does not lose anger, he gains choice. He can decide how to express it. He can use its clarity without its destruction. Anger sharpened by awareness becomes assertiveness. It becomes direct communication. It becomes boundaries stated without violence. It becomes action taken with purpose rather than impulse. The key difference between destructive anger and constructive anger is timing. Destructive anger acts immediately. Constructive anger waits. Waiting allows clarity to enter. It allows the rational mind to evaluate the situation. It allows the man to choose a response aligned with his values rather than his impulse. This waiting is not weakness, it is strength under tension. Handling anger also requires releasing the belief that dominance equals control. Many men were taught that raising their voice or asserting force proves strength. In reality, the man who remains calm while addressing conflict holds the true position of power. Calm authority disarms. Emotional volatility escalates. When you speak from grounded anger rather than explosive anger, your words land with weight. They are heard rather than resisted. Another crucial aspect of anger mastery is recognizing displacement. Many men express anger in places where it does not belong because they avoid addressing its true source. Frustration at work spills into relationships. Disappointment turns into irritability. Unspoken resentment becomes sarcasm. This misdirection damages connection and increases internal tension. Handling anger means tracing it back to its origin, asking, "What am I actually responding to?" This question alone interrupts blind reaction. It turns anger inward for understanding rather than outward for damage. Physical movement also plays a role in anger regulation. Anger is energy. Energy must move. But movement does not have to be destructive. Walking, training, controlled exertion allow anger to release without consequence. This release clears the body so the mind can think clearly. Many men mistake expression for resolution. Expression without awareness only reinforces patterns. Resolution comes from understanding and integration. Over time, as you practice staying present with anger, your relationship with it changes. You stop fearing it. You stop being ashamed of it. You stop being controlled by it. Anger becomes a signal you respect rather than a force you obey. This respect transforms your identity. You no longer see yourself as someone who loses control when angry. You see yourself as someone who can handle intensity. This self-perception builds confidence. Confidence reduces reactivity. Reduced reactivity deepens control. This cycle strengthens emotional mastery. Anger handled correctly also strengthens boundaries. You become clearer about what you tolerate and what you do not. You communicate limits without hostility. You walk away when necessary without resentment. You act when action is required without cruelty. This clarity protects your energy and preserves your integrity. The ultimate goal is not to eliminate anger, but to integrate it. Integrated anger becomes conviction. It becomes decisiveness. It becomes the force that drives purposeful action rather than impulsive reaction. A man who has integrated his anger cannot be easily provoked. He does not need to prove strength. He embodies it. He understands that anger is a messenger, not a master. And once anger stops controlling you, something powerful happens. You feel more grounded, more steady, more capable of facing challenge without losing yourself. You stop fearing confrontation because you trust your response. You stop avoiding intensity because you can meet it with clarity. This trust is the true reward of mastery. Handling anger without letting it control you is not about becoming passive. It is about becoming precise. It is about using the fire without being burned by it. And when a man learns to do this, his presence changes. His reactions soften. His authority deepens. His life becomes calmer, not because there is no conflict, but because conflict no longer controls him.
Chapter 7. Staying grounded during conflict and disrespect. Conflict is inevitable in a man's life. Disagreement, criticism, disrespect. These moments arrive whether you seek them or not. What defines you is not whether conflict appears, but how you meet it. Most men lose emotional control not because the situation is extreme, but because their sense of identity feels threatened. When respect feels challenged, the body reacts before the mind can catch up. Grounded men respond differently. They do not rush to defend. They do not explode to prove strength. They remain centered. And that centering is what gives them authority. Staying grounded during conflict begins with understanding that disrespect only has power if you internalize it. A comment, a tone, or a challenge cannot destabilize you unless it hooks into something inside you. When you react instantly, you reveal where the hook landed. When you remain calm, you remove its leverage. This does not mean tolerating mistreatment, it means choosing how and when to address it. Grounded men do not meet disrespect with emotional escalation, they meet it with clarity. They slow the moment down, they maintain posture, they keep their voice steady, they let silence do part of the work. Silence unsettles those who expect reaction. It shifts control back into your hands. Many conflicts escalate because both sides attempt to dominate the emotional space. Voices rise, bodies tense, ego competes. The grounded man refuses this dance. He does not compete for dominance, he maintains presence. Presence is more powerful than aggression because it signals certainty. Certainty does not need to shout, it simply exists. When you stay grounded, your nervous system remains regulated, your breath stays slow, your awareness stays wide. This allows you to read the situation instead of being consumed by it. You notice what is being said and what is not. You sense whether the conflict is about misunderstanding, insecurity, power, or emotion. This insight allows you to respond strategically rather than emotionally. A grounded response often disarms conflict before it escalates. Calm exposes overreaction. Stillness reveals instability in others without you having to point it out. When you do speak, your words land with weight because they are not fueled by impulse. They are measured, direct, controlled. This creates a psychological shift. The other person feels your steadiness. They sense that emotional pressure will not move you. This often forces them to adjust their own behavior. Conflict loses momentum when one person refuses to escalate. Staying grounded also means letting go of the need to win every exchange. Many men react because they believe losing an argument equals losing respect. In reality, emotional control builds respect far more effectively than verbal victory. Walking away calmly communicates strength more than shouting ever could. Choosing silence communicates confidence when words would only feed chaos. This restraint is not weakness, it is discipline. Discipline is the ability to choose long-term authority over short-term satisfaction. Disrespect often tests ego. The grounded man does not let ego drive response. He understands that identity is not fragile. It does not need constant defense. When you know who you are, external challenge cannot shake you easily. This internal certainty is what allows calm to remain intact. Grounded men also understand timing. Not every issue must be addressed in the heat of the moment. Sometimes the strongest move is to step back and address it later when emotions have settled. This delay prevents regret and preserves clarity. It also communicates self-control. Over time, people learn that you cannot be baited into emotional reaction. This reduces future conflict. Another key element of staying grounded is body awareness. Conflict activates the body. Heart rate rises, muscles tighten. Awareness of these sensations allows you to regulate them. Slow breathing, relaxed shoulders, a grounded stance. These physical adjustments signal calm to your nervous system. The body follows the signal, the mind follows the body. This regulation keeps you anchored. Grounded men also set boundaries without hostility. They state expectations clearly. They do not threaten. They do not explain excessively. They communicate limits calmly and follow through consistently. This consistency builds credibility. People respect boundaries that are enforced without emotional volatility. Staying grounded during disrespect also requires acceptance. Acceptance that not everyone will understand you, not everyone will respect you, not every challenge requires engagement. This acceptance frees you from the need to correct or confront every perceived slight. You conserve energy for what truly matters. Over time, grounding becomes identity. You no longer feel pulled into emotional storms. You observe them.
You choose how close to stand. You decide when to engage and when to disengage. This choice restores control. It allows you to remain composed even in hostile environments. Your presence becomes steady, predictable in calmness, unpredictable in reaction. This combination creates strength. People cannot manipulate what they cannot trigger. Grounded during conflict does not remove emotion, it refines it. Anger becomes clarity, frustration becomes firmness, disappointment becomes discernment. You stop reacting to disrespect and start responding from values. This alignment between response and values builds self-respect, and self-respect is the foundation of external respect. The man who remains grounded under pressure does not need to dominate. He does not need to prove. He does not need to win. He simply remains himself, calm, clear, present. And that presence speaks louder than any reaction ever could.
Chapter 8. Emotional Control in Relationships and Leadership. A man's emotional control is revealed most clearly in how he shows up with other people, not when he is alone, not when life is quiet, but when expectations collide, emotions rise, and influence is required. Relationships and leadership expose emotional habits faster than any internal reflection ever could. This is where control stops being theory and becomes lived reality. In relationships, emotion is constant, feelings are exchanged, needs are expressed, tension appears without warning. Many men struggle here not because they do not care, but because they confuse emotional control with emotional distance. They believe staying regulated means shutting down or withdrawing. In truth, emotional control in relationships means staying present without becoming reactive. It means listening without defensiveness. It means responding without needing to dominate or escape. When a man lacks emotional control, relationships become unstable. Small disagreements turn into power struggles. Feedback feels like attack. Vulnerability feels like threat. Over time, this creates distance and resentment. But when emotional control is present, something powerful happens. Communication slows down. Understanding deepens. Trust grows. People feel safe expressing themselves because they are not met with volatility. Emotional safety is built through consistent regulation. A man who can remain calm when emotions run high becomes an anchor. He grounds the interaction. He does not escalate tension. He does not withdraw from discomfort. He stays engaged without losing himself. This balance is rare, and it is deeply attractive. In leadership, emotional control becomes even more critical. Leaders are watched constantly. Their reactions shape the emotional climate of the room. When a leader reacts impulsively, the environment becomes tense. People become guarded. Creativity shrinks. Fear grows. But when a leader remains composed, clarity spreads. Confidence rises. Others regulate themselves in response. Emotional control in leadership is not about suppressing emotion, it is about modeling stability. When pressure increases, people look to the leader for cues. Are they calm or panicked? Grounded or reactive? Clear or scattered? These cues shape performance more than words ever could. A leader who maintains emotional control during stress communicates trust in the process. That trust allows others to perform without fear. In both relationships and leadership, emotional control creates influence without force. People do not feel pushed, they feel guided. They do not feel dominated, they feel supported. This influence is quiet but powerful. It comes from consistency rather than intensity. Many men believe leadership requires emotional hardness. In reality, it requires emotional clarity. The ability to feel without being flooded, the ability to care without being consumed, the ability to make decisions without being hijacked by mood. Emotional clarity allows fairness, it allows listening, it allows decisive action without cruelty. In relationships, emotional control allows intimacy without chaos. You can be open without oversharing. You can be firm without being harsh.
You can express needs without making demands. This creates mutual respect. Respect grows when people feel heard and safe. Safety is created when emotional reactions are predictable and regulated. Over time, emotional control becomes the foundation of trust. Trust deepens connection. Connection strengthens influence. This applies equally to romantic relationships, friendships, teams, and families. Emotional regulation also allows boundaries to be set cleanly. A man who is emotionally controlled does not set boundaries in anger. He sets them calmly. He does not threaten. He states expectations and follows through. This consistency creates respect. People may not always like boundaries, but they respect those who enforce them without emotional volatility. Another powerful effect of emotional control in leadership is the ability to tolerate uncertainty. Leaders often face incomplete information, pressure to decide, conflicting opinions. Emotional control allows patience. It allows space for reflection. It prevents impulsive decisions driven by fear or ego. This patience leads to better outcomes. Better outcomes reinforce confidence. Confidence stabilizes leadership presence. In relationships, emotional control prevents unnecessary damage. Many relational wounds are not caused by disagreement, but by how disagreement is handled. Words spoken in anger linger. Reactions delivered without awareness leave scars. Emotional control reduces this damage. It allows repair. It allows accountability without shame. It allows growth rather than rupture. A man who controls his emotions becomes someone others can rely on. His responses are steady. His reactions are measured. His presence is consistent. This reliability becomes his reputation. People know what to expect. They feel safe around him. Safety builds loyalty. Loyalty strengthens connection. Emotional control also protects a man himself. He no longer carries the guilt of regretful reactions. He no longer replays conversations wishing he had stayed calm. His inner world becomes quieter. His confidence grows. This internal stability enhances his external influence. The man who leads himself emotionally can lead others effectively. He does not need to intimidate. He does not need to manipulate. He does not need to dominate. His control speaks for him. His presence commands respect. Emotional control in relationships and leadership is not about perfection. You will still feel frustration. You will still feel disappointment. You will still feel anger. The difference is that these emotions no longer decide your behavior. You decide. This decision becomes habit. Habit becomes identity. Identity becomes influence. Over time, emotional control transforms how you move through the world. Relationships become more honest. Leadership becomes more effective. Conflict becomes manageable. Respect becomes natural. This is the quiet power of regulation. Not flashy, not dramatic, but enduring. A man who masters emotional control becomes someone others trust under pressure. Someone who can hold space without collapsing. Someone who can lead without force. And in a world full of reaction, that steadiness becomes one of the rarest and most valuable traits a man can possess.
Chapter 9. Becoming calm when everything feels uncertain. Uncertainty is one of the greatest emotional tests a man will ever face. Not pain, not conflict, not even failure. Uncertainty, the not knowing, the waiting, the absence of clear answers. When the future feels unstable, the mind searches desperately for control. And when control feels out of reach, emotion surges, anxiety rises, impatience grows. Fear whispers worst-case scenarios. This is where many men lose themselves, not because they are weak, but because uncertainty exposes what has not yet been mastered inside. Becoming calm when everything feels uncertain is not about eliminating fear. It is about learning how to remain steady while fear exists. Uncertainty activates the nervous system because it removes predictability. The brain is designed to anticipate outcomes. When it cannot, it fills the gap with imagined threats. This is why uncertainty feels heavier than known hardship. At least with hardship, the enemy is visible. With uncertainty, the enemy is imagined. Calm men understand this difference. They do not fight uncertainty, they anchor themselves within it. The first step to calm in uncertainty is accepting what cannot be controlled. Resistance increases tension. Acceptance creates stability. Acceptance does not mean giving up. It means recognizing the boundary between influence and obsession. When you stop trying to control outcomes you cannot reach, your energy returns to the present moment. The present is the only place control exists. Calm men live here. They focus on what can be done now, what can be prepared, what can be strengthened. This focus restores agency. Agency reduces anxiety. Anxiety thrives in imagined futures. Calm grows in deliberate action. Another key to calm during uncertainty is slowing the pace. Uncertainty creates urgency, a false sense that something must be decided immediately. But urgency is rarely truth. It is emotion seeking relief. Calm men do not rush clarity. They allow it to form. They move deliberately. They understand that rushed decisions under uncertainty often create more chaos. Slowing down creates space for insight. It allows patterns to emerge. It allows perspective to widen. When you slow your body, your mind follows. Breath deepens. Muscles soften. Awareness expands. This physical regulation grounds you when the future feels unstable. Calm men also detach identity from outcome. Many men tie self-worth to results. Success means value. Failure means loss. Uncertainty threatens identity because it threatens outcome. When you detach who you are from what happens, calm becomes possible. You are no longer fighting for proof of worth. You are simply navigating experience. This detachment does not reduce ambition. It refines it. You still pursue goals, but you are not emotionally destroyed when the path becomes unclear. Calm men trust process over prediction. They know that clarity often arrives through movement, not certainty. They take the next grounded step without needing to see the entire staircase. This trust stabilizes emotion. It replaces panic with patience. Another essential element is limiting mental speculation. The mind under uncertainty becomes hyperactive. It rehearses scenarios. It imagines disasters. It replays conversations. Calm men notice when thought turns repetitive and unproductive. They interrupt it. They return attention to the body, to breath, to immediate task. This interruption prevents anxiety loops from gaining momentum. Emotional control during uncertainty also requires self-permission to not know. Many men feel pressure to have answers, to appear certain, to appear confident. This pressure creates internal conflict. Calm men release the need to perform certainty. They allow themselves to be unsure without collapsing. This honesty reduces internal tension. It allows genuine confidence to form, confidence rooted in adaptability rather than prediction. Over time, calm during uncertainty becomes a practiced state. You begin to notice that most feared outcomes never occur, that waiting does not destroy you, that not knowing does not mean losing control. This realization builds resilience. Each uncertain period survived strengthens your trust in yourself. You learn that you can remain stable even when the future is unclear. This trust changes how you face life. You stop trying to eliminate uncertainty. You stop demanding guarantees. You start focusing on preparation rather than prediction. Preparation builds strength. Strength builds calm. Calm allows clear thinking. Clear thinking improves outcomes. This cycle reinforces itself. Calm men also maintain perspective. They remember past uncertainties they survived, past moments where clarity eventually arrived. This memory grounds the present. It reminds you that uncertainty is temporary even when it feels endless. Perspective reduces emotional intensity. It replaces panic with patience. Becoming calm when everything feels uncertain does not mean withdrawing from life. It means engaging without desperation.
It means acting without panic. It means trusting your ability to adapt. This trust becomes your anchor. When you carry this calm, others feel it. Your presence steadies conversations. Your decisions feel measured. Your actions feel intentional. This influence grows naturally. People trust men who remain calm under uncertainty, not because they have answers, but because they do not unravel. Calm under uncertainty is one of the strongest signals of emotional mastery. It shows that you are no longer driven by fear of the unknown. You are guided by confidence in yourself. This confidence does not come from knowing what will happen. It comes from knowing you can handle whatever does. And when that belief becomes solid, uncertainty loses its grip. The future may remain unclear, but your inner state does not. You remain grounded, present, capable. This is the calm that cannot be shaken, not because life is predictable, but because you are prepared.
Chapter 10. The man who controls his emotions controls his life. There is a quiet moment that arrives when emotional control is no longer something you practice, but something you live. It does not announce itself. It does not feel dramatic. It feels steady. You notice it when situations that once pulled you off balance no longer do, when pressure arrives and you do not rush, when conflict appears and you do not harden or collapse, when uncertainty lingers and you remain grounded. This is the moment you realize that control has moved from technique to identity. A man who controls his emotions controls his life, because he controls his responses. And response is where direction is decided. Life does not shape you through events alone. It shapes you through how you meet them. Two men can face the same challenge and walk away changed in opposite ways. The difference is not circumstance, it is regulation. Emotional control gives you authorship over your trajectory. You stop being dragged by impulse and start steering with intention. This shift is profound. When emotions no longer dictate behavior, your decisions improve. When decisions improve, outcomes follow. When outcomes stabilize, confidence grows. This confidence is not loud, it is rooted. It does not depend on validation, it is built on trust in your own capacity to handle pressure without losing yourself. This trust changes how you move. You speak with clarity. You listen without defensiveness. You act without urgency. People sense this. They respond differently. Respect begins to follow you rather than being demanded. Influence becomes natural rather than forced. Emotional control also frees you from the past. Regret loses its grip when you stop creating new reasons for it. You no longer replay conversations wishing you had stayed calm. You no longer carry the weight of impulsive decisions. Your inner world becomes quieter. That quiet is not emptiness, it is space. Space for focus, space for growth, space for meaning. With this space, discipline strengthens. You choose habits intentionally. You invest energy where it matters. You let go of distractions that once consumed you. Emotional control conserves strength. Conserved strength compounds over time. This compounding changes life direction. Small daily choices made with clarity create long-term transformation. A man who controls his emotions also becomes consistent. Consistency builds reliability. Reliability builds trust. Trust builds opportunity. Whether in work, relationships, or leadership, opportunity flows toward those who can be depended on under pressure. Emotional control is the foundation of dependability. It tells the world that you are steady, that you can be trusted with responsibility, that you will not collapse when stakes rise. This steadiness becomes your reputation. You also begin to understand that control does not mean rigidity. It means flexibility. You adapt without breaking. You feel without being consumed. You respond without being reactive. This flexibility allows growth. You learn from the mistakes without shame. You accept feedback without defensiveness. You adjust course without losing confidence. This adaptability is intelligence in motion.
Over time, emotional control reshapes your identity. You stop labeling yourself as reactive or volatile. You see yourself as grounded, capable, calm. Identity drives behavior. Behavior reinforces identity. This loop strengthens mastery. You begin to trust yourself in situations that once felt overwhelming. You stop avoiding challenge. You stop fearing confrontation. You face life directly because you know you can handle what arises inside you. This self-trust is liberating. It removes the constant background anxiety of losing control. With that anxiety gone, presence deepens. You are more engaged in conversations, more focused in work, more attentive in relationships. Life feels fuller because you are no longer scattered by emotion. Emotional control also clarifies values. When you are not hijacked by impulse, you can act in alignment with what matters to you. You choose integrity over ego, patience over reaction, purpose over gratification. This alignment builds self-respect. Self-respect becomes confidence. Confidence anchors calm. Calm sustains control. This cycle becomes self-reinforcing. A man who controls his emotions does not need to prove strength. He embodies it. He does not chase validation. He generates stability. He does not dominate conversations. He guides them. He does not escalate conflict. He resolves it or disengages without bitterness. He understands that control is not about winning moments. It is about winning direction. Life will continue to present challenge. Stress will appear. Disrespect will test. Uncertainty will linger. Emotional control does not remove these realities. It changes how you experience them. You move through difficulty without losing clarity. You endure pressure without losing kindness. You face uncertainty without losing ground. This steadiness becomes your edge. It allows you to build rather than repair, to lead rather than react, to create rather than defend. In the end, emotional control is freedom. Freedom from impulse, freedom from regret, freedom from being ruled by the loudest feeling in the room. It gives you the ability to choose who you are in each moment, and those moments add up. They become character, they become destiny. The man who controls his emotions controls his life, because he controls the only thing that truly belongs to him, his response. And from that response, everything else follows.